Picture a telephone booth in the lobby of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. The year is 1971. The glass door is fogged from the breath of a young man who has been inside for 7 minutes, pressing the receiver so hard against his ear that the skin around his knuckles has gone white. His name is Corporal Danny Reyes. He is 22 years old, 3 days back from his second tour in Vietnam, and he is trying to explain to his mother in Albuquerque, New Mexico, why there is no money coming. His dress uniform, which he ironed himself that morning in a bathroom he is sharing with 2 other veterans at a hostel 6 blocks away, has a single crease running down the left sleeve. The crease is off-center by exactly ½ an inch. On the other side of that glass door, 40 feet away across a marble floor that reflects the lobby chandeliers in long amber streaks, John Wayne is standing still. He is not reading anything. He is not talking to anyone. He is watching the telephone booth the way a man watches something he recognizes without being able to name it. And in the next 10 minutes, he is going to do something that no publicist will ever write a press release about, something that no studio will ever turn into a legend, something that the young man inside that glass booth will spend the rest of his life trying to describe accurately to people who simply will not believe him. This is that story. It is Wednesday, the 14th of April, 1971. The time is 11:17 in the morning. Outside the Beverly Wilshire Hotel on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills, California, the temperature is 68 degrees. But inside the marble lobby, the air conditioning has it down to 62, and the cold settles into the bones the way it does in early spring when the body hasn't decided yet whether to brace or relax. The Beverly Wilshire is not just a hotel in 1971. It is a particular kind of theater. Its lobby has hosted contract negotiations, industry divorces, the announcement of 3 Best Picture nominations, and at least one conversation between a director and his lead actor that ended with a handshake worth $400,000. The concierge at the main desk, a man named Gerald Harmon who has held the position for 11 years, knows the name of every studio head in Los Angeles and keeps a private mental catalog of exactly which table they prefer, what they drink before noon, and who they absolutely cannot be seated near. He has seen most things a hotel lobby can produce. What he has not seen very often, what almost nobody in this lobby has seen, is a man in a military dress uniform using the public telephone booth near the East Corridor. That booth exists mostly for the use of guests who have stepped out without their room keys and need to call upstairs, or for the occasional visitor who cannot afford the room rate surcharge on in-room long-distance calls. Corporal Danny Reyes had no room. He was not a guest. He had walked into the Beverly Wilshire that morning because the telephone at the hostel on Cahuenga had a broken receiver, and the pay phone on the corner had been vandalized 2 days earlier, and a woman at the VA assistant's office on Sepulveda had told him that the hotel lobbies on Wilshire generally didn't trouble a man in dress uniform if he needed to use their facilities. She had been right. Gerald Harmon had glanced at the corporal's insignia, looked at the set of the young man's jaw, and said nothing. What Gerald had not known, what nobody in the lobby knew yet, was that Corporal Reyes had received his separation pay 11 days earlier, $1,240. He had used $900 of it to clear a debt his younger brother had accumulated in the 17 months Danny had been overseas. He had used $212 to travel from Fort Bragg to Los Angeles, where he believed, based on a letter 3 months old, that his mother had relocated after the landlord in Albuquerque raised the rent. The letter had been wrong. His mother was still in Albuquerque. She had moved twice since writing it and had not been able to forward the updated address in time. Danny had arrived in Los Angeles with $128, no confirmed address for his family, and a standing offer of a construction job in Phoenix that started in 9 days. 9 days he needed to survive in a city where he knew almost nobody. He was not asking for anything dramatic in that phone booth. He was asking his mother if she had $40 she could wire to a Western Union office. He had already asked twice. Her answer both times had been silence, not the silence of refusal, but the silence of a woman calculating whether $40 was something that could actually happen. It could not. Danny knew it could not. He was staying on the line anyway because the act of staying on the line was the last thing he had that felt like connection. The phone call had been going for 7 minutes and 14 seconds when the lobby door opened and John Wayne walked in. He was not scheduled to be at the Beverly Wilshire that morning. He had a production meeting at 9 that had run until 10:40, and his driver had taken Wilshire instead of Santa Monica because of a backup near La Cienega, and Wayne had asked to be let out 3 blocks early because he needed to walk. He walked into the Beverly Wilshire the way a man walks into a place he has been 100 times. Not hurrying, not performing, just moving with the particular economy of a person who has learned that the fastest way through a space is to own your pace and let other people adjust. He was 63 years old. He stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and carried 225 pounds in the careful way of a large man who has spent 40 years being physically precise on camera. His hands, and anyone who had ever worked with him on a set would mention the hands, were not the hands of an actor. They were the hands of someone who had loaded his own horse trailers, repaired his own fences on his ranch in Stanfield, Arizona, and spent enough time doing physical production work in the early years of his career that the calluses had simply become permanent. The left hand had a faint scar along the base of the thumb from a wire fence on the set of The Searchers in 1955 that he had never bothered to explain to anyone. He did not see Danny Reyes right away. He stopped near the concierge desk to ask Gerald Harmon something. Gerald would later say he couldn't remember what the question was, only that it took less than 30 seconds. And then he turned toward the east corridor to find the men's room, and that was when he saw the phone booth. He saw the pressed dress uniform through the fogged glass. He saw the white knuckles on the receiver. He saw the angle of the young man's shoulders, which were not the shoulders of a man having a comfortable conversation. John Wayne stopped walking. He stood 40 feet from the phone booth, and he did not move for almost 90 seconds. Gerald Harmon watched him from the desk. 2 women crossing the lobby with shopping bags from Saks slowed their pace slightly as they passed him, recognizing the silhouette, but not quite believing it was real. Wayne paid no attention to any of them. He was watching the phone booth the way a man watches something that reminds him of something he cannot fully locate in memory, but knows was important. But here's where it changes. He didn't move the way other men moved. That was the first thing people always said who encountered John Wayne in a space that was not a sound stage. On camera, the size was expected, the deliberateness was expected, the way his eyes settled on a thing before the rest of him committed to an action. All of that was understood because it had been projected on screens 40 feet wide for 4 decades. But in a lobby, at 11:17 on a Wednesday morning, with no director calling action and no crew waiting, the quality was unsettling in the way that a still body of deep water is unsettling. You knew there was mass beneath the surface. You just couldn't see how far down it went. His eyes had not moved from the phone booth. He had taken in the military cut of the uniform, the corporal's stripes, the particular exhaustion that lives in a young man's posture when he has been carrying something heavy for longer than he expected to carry it. Wayne had not served in World War II, a fact that had followed him for 30 years like a splinter he could not fully work out. And the men who had served, the men who came back from Korea and now from Vietnam, occupied a specific place in his private geography of respect. Not obligation. Not guilt, though some people chose to interpret it that way. Something older and less discussable than either of those things. He had made the Green Berets in 1968, traveling to Fort Benning, Georgia, to spend 3 weeks with active duty Special Forces personnel before a single frame was shot. He had not done it for the film. He had done it because he needed to understand what the body looked like when it had been through something real, and no amount of technical consultation replicated that understanding. The men at Fort Benning had been mostly polite and somewhat cautious with him. The way men are with very famous people, they have not decided whether to trust yet. By the 3rd week, 2 of them had stopped being polite and started being direct, which was what he had been waiting for. He understood the phone booth. He understood the white knuckles and the off-center crease, and the particular quality of a person staying on a call not because the call was going well, but because ending it would mean standing alone in a lobby with no next move. He reached into the inside breast pocket of his jacket. His hand was steady. Gerald Harmon, from the concierge desk, watched him take out his wallet. He watched Wayne open it, look at what was inside, and then stand still for 4 seconds as if doing arithmetic. And that was the moment before anything had been said, before any action had been taken, that Gerald Harmon later said he will never forget for the rest of his life, because in those 4 seconds he understood what he was watching even before it happened, and he had the involuntary thought, "Nobody is going to believe me when I tell them this." What happened next, nobody expected. The phone booth door opened at 11:22. Corporal Danny Reyes stepped out with the particular careful blankness of a young man who has just had a difficult conversation and is now attempting to reconstruct a functional expression. He was looking at the floor. He had $43 and some change in his pocket, 9 days until his Phoenix job started, and no clear plan for what came between now and then. He almost walked directly into John Wayne. He stopped. He looked up, and for approximately 3 seconds, the two of them stood 18 inches apart in the lobby of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, while Danny Reyes' brain did what a young man's brain does when it encounters something completely outside the framework of expectations it has built for the morning. Wayne spoke first, which, to anyone who knew him well, was the tell that something unusual was happening. He never spoke first in situations he hadn't read completely. He spoke here because he had already read it. He said, "That was a long call. Everything all right?" His voice was what it always was. Low, level, carrying the particular resonance of a man who had spent his professional life learning to project without shouting. Danny Reyes said he was fine. His voice was slightly too controlled, the way voices are when fine is the only available answer. Wayne nodded once. He said, "You just get back?" Danny said 3 days. A hotel guest crossed between them heading for the elevator. Neither man moved. Wayne said, "Vietnam?" Danny said, "Yes, sir." Second tour. The sir was automatic, not starstruck. Danny Reyes had grown up with John Wayne movies the way most American boys of his generation had, but he was 3 days out of a combat zone, and his nervous system had not yet recalibrated to the kind of reality where John Wayne could be a person standing in front of you rather than a concept. What he registered was not fame. What he registered was the size of the man, the stillness, and the quality of attention being paid to him, which was total, unhurried, and somehow completely private despite the marble lobby and the chandeliers and the concierge watching from 40 feet away. Wayne said, "You need to get somewhere?" Danny said he had a situation handled. He said it the way soldiers say things are handled when they are not handled, but cannot be anything else. Wayne looked at him for 2 seconds. Then he said, "Come sit down for a minute." It was not a question. It was not a command. It was the specific verbal register of a person who has made a decision and is inviting you to be part of it without offering you much room to decline politely. Danny Reyes later said he didn't even think about whether to follow. He just followed. A producer named Alan Hedgewick who happened to be in the lobby that morning waiting for a studio contact. A man who had been in the film industry for 17 years and had watched many things happen in many hotel lobbies, later described what he witnessed as the most efficiently quiet act of all he had ever seen. No performance, no gesture toward an audience, just a large man and a young soldier walking toward a pair of chairs near the east windows, and everyone in the lobby finding reasons to look somewhere else, because even from a distance it was clear this was not something meant for them. The stakes in that moment were real. They sat down. The chairs were the kind that lobby designers select for the impression of comfort rather than its reality. Low-backed, upholstered in a pale gold that matched the carpet, spaced 18 inches apart at an angle that suggested conversation without demanding it. Wayne sat in the left chair with the ease of a man who has learned to occupy space without taking it. Danny Reyes sat in the right one and held his uniform cap in both hands the way soldiers hold things when they need something to do with their hands. In the first moment, Wayne did not ask about the war. He asked where home was. Danny said Albuquerque. His mother was still there, he said. He had tried to get out to Los Angeles because he thought she'd moved, but the letter had been old. He said it with the particular brevity of a man summarizing a situation that has too many moving parts to explain fully to a stranger. Wayne said, "So you're stuck in Los Angeles with 9 days to fill, and not much to fill it with." It wasn't a question. Danny said, "Essentially, yes, sir." In the second moment, and this was the thing that Alan Hedgewick, watching from across the lobby, could not fully account for, Wayne reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small leather notebook. Not a prop. Not something for show. A working notebook, the kind that has phone numbers and measurements and half-finished lists. He opened it to a blank page and took out a pen. He said, "What's the construction job in Phoenix?" Danny blinked. He said he hadn't mentioned Phoenix. Wayne said, "You said 9 days. A man with 9 days to fill who just got back from a second tour doesn't say 9 days unless 9 days means something specific. So what's in Phoenix?" Danny told him. A framing contractor named Bill Ochoa who had served with Danny's uncle in Korea and had offered Danny a position starting the 23rd. Wayne wrote something in the notebook. He said, "Bill Ochoa, Phoenix framing." "All right." He tore the page out and set it on the arm of his chair. Then he wrote something else. In the third moment, he held out the notebook. He had written a name and a telephone number. He said, "That's a man named Roy Gleason. He runs the building and grounds operation at my production company. I've got a maintenance situation on a property in Encino that needs 2 weeks of framing work. Roy's been trying to find somebody for 3 weeks. He's not easy to work with, but he pays correctly and he doesn't waste your time." Danny Reyes looked at the notebook. He said, "Sir, I'm not looking for." Wayne said, "I know what you're not looking for." He paused. "Roy pays $42 a day. The work starts Monday if you want it. If you don't, throw the number away." The lobby had not gone loud at any point during this exchange. It had simply gone quiet in the particular way that spaces go quiet when something is happening that people do not want to interrupt by acknowledging. Gerald Harmon had not moved from the concierge desk. Alan Hedgewick had not moved from his chair. 3 hotel guests who had been crossing the lobby had found reasons to slow their pace near the east windows without appearing to slow their pace. Nobody on that lobby floor moved. In the fourth moment, Wayne reached back into his jacket. He took out his wallet again. He removed 4 $50 bills, $200, and set them on the arm of Danny's chair beneath the notebook page with Roy Gleason's number. He did not say anything for 3 seconds. Then he said, "That's not charity. That's a loan. If the Phoenix job pays out the way it should, Roy'll give you my production company address, and you can send it back when you're straight. If it doesn't pay out that way, then we'll call it what it needs to be called. Either way, you eat for 9 days." Danny Reyes did not move. He was 22 years old and 3 days back from Vietnam, and the situation had changed so completely in 4 minutes that his brain was still trying to locate the appropriate register in which to respond to it. He said, "Why?" It was the only available question. Wayne looked at him with the particular directness that the people who knew him personally, not the audience, not the press, the people who had actually sat across from him in an unscripted room, described as the realest thing about him. He said, "Because you ironed that uniform this morning, and you wore it in here to make a phone call you couldn't make anywhere else, and you didn't ask anybody for a damn thing." He let that sit for 2 seconds. Then he said, "That's worth something." He stood up, because the demonstration was over and Wayne operated on the principle that anything said after the essential thing has been said is surplus. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Danny Reyes one more time. He said, "Call Roy before Friday." Then he walked across the lobby toward the east corridor and did not look back. In the next 3 seconds, the room came back to itself. Gerald Harmon exhaled slowly behind his desk. Alan Hedgewick uncrossed his legs. 2 hotel guests who had been frozen in mid-step near the east windows resumed walking, as if they had never stopped. Danny Reyes sat in the gold chair holding a notebook page with a phone number, $200 in folded 50s, and his uniform cap in his lap. He did not move for almost 2 full minutes. That's not hospitality. That's not celebrity generosity performed for a lobby audience. That's something older than either of those things. The specific act of a man who has been paying attention to a situation that nobody asked him to pay attention to, and who has responded to it with the only currency that actually resolves it: time, money, and a job that didn't require explaining. Danny Reyes called Roy Gleason on Thursday morning from the same hotel lobby, from the same telephone booth. Roy Gleason was, as advertised, not easy to work with. He was a 54-year-old former Navy Construction Battalion veteran who communicated primarily in specific instructions and had no interest in preamble. He asked Danny 3 questions. Could he read a framing plan? Had he worked with a nail gun? And was he available Monday at 6 in the morning? Danny said yes to all 3. Gleason said, "Be at the Encino address at 5:50. Don't be late." The work lasted 11 days, not 2 weeks, because Danny was fast and the job moved ahead of schedule. Roy Gleason paid him $462, which was 11 days at $42. He also gave Danny the production company's mailing address in Burbank without being asked, which meant that Roy knew about the loan and had been expecting the request, which meant that Wayne had told him in advance, which meant the whole arrangement had been thought through before Danny Reyes ever sat down in the gold chair. Wayne was not there for any of the 11 days. He was filming in Monument Valley. On the last day, Roy Gleason came by the Encino property at 4 in the afternoon to sign off on the completed work. He walked through the frames, checked the measurements, made 3 marks on his clipboard, and signed his name. Then he stood next to Danny Reyes in the framed skeleton of the structure and said, "Duke says you've got a good eye." Danny said, He hadn't seen Mr. Wayne since the lobby. Gleason said, "He asked me how you were doing after the first week. I told him you were good." That's what he said. Danny Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't understand why he did it." Roy Gleason looked at the framing for a few seconds. He said, "He did it because it needed doing and he was there." That's the whole answer. Some people spend 40 years waiting for a bigger reason than that. Duke spent 40 years not waiting. He closed his clipboard. He said, "Mail the check to Burbank. He'll know what it is." The private conversation lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. No cameras. No publicity team. No record of it in any studio document or press archive. Just two men in a half-built room in Encino at the end of a working day. Danny Reyes mailed a check for $200 to the Burbank production company address 3 months later, from Phoenix, when the framing contractor job had stabilized into something that looked like a real career. He included a single line on a piece of paper. Loan repaid. Thank you for the job lead. He received, 6 weeks after that, a response on production company letterhead. 3 sentences. Glad the work in Phoenix is solid. Roy said you were fast with a framing plan. Keep that up. It was signed with a first initial and a last name. The signature was illegible in the way that very famous people's signatures become illegible after decades of being asked to produce them quickly. But it was clearly not typed, and the handwriting on the letter itself was in a different hand than the signature, which meant the signature had been added separately, which meant someone had brought the letter to Wayne specifically to sign. He had read the check. He had remembered. He had taken 45 seconds to close the loop. The quotable line, when Danny Reyes eventually told the story, first to his wife in 1978, then to a Veterans of Foreign Wars chapter in Phoenix in 1989, then to his son in 2003, was always Roy Gleason's. Not Wayne's. He did it because it needed doing, and he was there. That was the whole lesson. It took 32 words. Years later, specifically in October of 1997, Danny Reyes was the superintendent on a commercial construction project in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was managing a crew of 22. One of the younger workers, a 24-year-old named Marcus Trejo, who had been back from service in the Gulf for about 8 months, showed up one Tuesday morning with the specific careful blankness that Danny Reyes had worn in his own face in a Beverly Hills hotel lobby 26 years before. Danny didn't say anything about it until lunch. Then he sat down next to Marcus and asked where home was. Marcus said El Paso. His family was there. He was sending money back when he could. Danny said, "You need anything this week?" Marcus looked at him with the particular wariness of a young man who has learned that offers from strangers generally come with architecture. Danny said, "Not a loan. Not charity. Just, if you need something this week, you tell me, and I'll tell you if I can handle it." Marcus Trejo said later, when he became a general contractor in Tucson in 2009, that nobody had ever put it to him that simply. Not the VA, not his family, not the various well-meaning civilian programs that existed to help returning veterans. Just, if you need something this week, tell me. He said he had been carrying that sentence for 12 years and had used it 43 times in the same way, sitting next to young workers who had the particular blankness that means the morning has already been harder than it looks. The second-generation impact of an 11-minute lobby conversation in 1971 had become, by 2009, something that moved through construction sites in Arizona and New Mexico the way useful things move. Without attribution, without ceremony, with only the practical knowledge that it works. Danny Reyes visited John Wayne's grave at Pacific View Memorial Park in Corona del Mar, California, in the summer of 1980, 1 year after Wayne's death from stomach cancer on June 11, 1979. He stood there for 4 minutes. He did not say anything out loud. He had a check stub in his pocket from the Phoenix framing job, the one from 1971, which he had kept, and he didn't know why he had brought it except that it seemed like the correct object to have in his hand in that place at that moment. Now come back to the telephone booth in the lobby of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel on the 14th of April, 1971, at 11:22 in the morning. A young man in a dress uniform steps out of a glass door with $43 and no clear next move. A large man in a sport coat is standing 18 inches in front of him. The large man's hands are at his sides. He does not perform recognition. He does not position himself as a benefactor. He asks one question, "Everything all right?" The question is the answer. It's the demonstration of the principle that John Wayne had been living for 63 years without being able to articulate it in any interview or press profile, because it is the kind of principle that only makes sense in practice. You pay attention to what is in front of you. You do what the situation requires. You don't make the other person perform gratitude. You don't make yourself perform generosity. You do it because it needs doing and you are there. That was the whole answer. Roy Gleason had it right. One soldier. One lobby. One lesson that 11-minute conversations can carry for 50 years. The story you just heard, the loan, the job referral, the 3-sentence letter from Burbank, none of that appears in any Wayne biography published during his lifetime or the 2 decades after. The Beverly Wilshire had no record of the exchange. The production company in Burbank was dissolved in 1982, and its files were not preserved. What exists is Danny Rea's account, Roy Gleason's words as Danny reported them, and Alan Hedgewick's production notes from that morning, which mentioned, in a single line between 2 items of studio business, that he had witnessed John Wayne give a veteran $200 and a job in a hotel lobby and had walked away before the man could thank him. A single line, between 2 items of studio business. History was made here, and the world almost missed it. But there is one story, one encounter between John Wayne and a man he never named publicly, a conversation that took place not in a hotel lobby or on a film set, but in a parking lot outside a Veterans Administration office in 1974. That Wayne refused to discuss with any interviewer for the remaining 5 years of his life. His publicist at the time described it simply as the one story the Duke said was not his to tell. What happened in that parking lot, and why John Wayne believed the story belonged to someone else, that's a story for another time.